Adam, you've done a lot of traveling, seen a fair bit of the world. Have you ever been to the Golden Temple in Amritsar, India?
No, that's a dream destination, but haven't made it there yet.
Me neither, but I've heard it's pretty Sikh.
I'm angry. I'm angry that this is how we did it, but not a bad joke, I must confess.
Hello and welcome to Revolutions Over Time, the podcast where we look at protests, revolutions, past and present, and we try to make sense of it all. I'm Sam, and joining me, as always, is a man with a very common name, but whose revolutionary spirit is all too rare in the world today. Adam, how are you?
I'm doing well, Sam. I'm doing fine. I'm recovering from a fall off of my bike. Have one of those gnarly bruises that's under your fingernail and will just have to grow out. How are you?
I don't ride bikes, unfortunately, so no falls to report, but we're glad to hear you're okay. I'm doing all right. Since our last recording, International Workers' Day, May Day, has passed.
Yeah.
Which I think is an increasingly important holiday around the world. In America, and I think as well as the UK, we don't officially celebrate it, right?
The UK, it's the Monday following the 1st of May. Which is just called May Day.
In the UK, it's like a pagan holiday thing, right?
It is, yeah. It's like a beginning of summer festival is the official reason for it. It's also like called Beltane.
Which I do think is quite a shrewd distraction of, okay, we're going to give the people the day off when everyone else is having the day off, but we're going to kind of distract from the international working solidarity, and we're going to run around poles in the field, right?
Yeah, I don't think there are many people who actually dance around a maypole, although I think that would be a nice day out. Pretty shrewd. It's better disguised than in the Netherlands, where they have King's Day 3 days before May Day.
I mean, in the US, we just don't have any acknowledgement whatsoever.
Yeah, you have a Labor Day, but it's in September?
Correct. The head of the UAW, which is the largest union in America, the United Auto Workers, he gave a speech this May Day where he said, "We will not let the rich decide this holiday for us," because it was chosen by the elites, and it's widely known in America as the last day to go boating and wear white on your boat. So if that's any indication of like Labor Day in America. But on May 1st, there has been a growing movement of people calling out from work or just not showing up to work to protest. And this year saw the largest crowds, to where even like conservative media outlets had to cover it because it was too hard to ignore.
Cool.
Yeah. Solidarity with all workers around the world. I think it's kind of interesting how you see capitalist countries, it's a day of protest, but then in more socialist places, it's, a government-sponsored day of celebration, right?
Yeah.
Like Vietnam, Cuba, China, those places. So, I don't know, maybe we can push for those better working conditions. We can all celebrate one day.
Here's hoping. Happy May Day.
And that same week, April 29th passed, and it marked a pretty important anniversary for a certain group of people, which is why I wanted to make this episode today. On that day, April 29th, 1986, a group of Sikh militants gathered inside the Golden Temple complex in Amritsar in India and declared the formation of an independent Sikh state, and they called it Khalistan. If you've heard a different pronunciation, please let me know. This episode will have a lot of South Asian place names. I will probably be butchering all of them. That state of Khalistan does not exist on any map today, but the movement that declared it certainly still does. And the Indian government has spent 40 years trying to crush it. And in the past year alone, Canada expelled Indian diplomats over an alleged assassination plot on Canadian soil, and the UK extradited a suspect to India. So Khalistan keeps coming back in the global political landscape. So let's talk about it, Adam.
Let's do it.
We're going to work backwards, because before we can talk about the Khalistan movement, we have to talk about their faith, because it's not a secular nationalist project. Khalistan literally means land of the Khalsa, and the Khalsa is a religious concept. So let's talk about Sikhism in a very general, short-form way. What do you know about Sikhism, Adam? And what do you think the general public over in Europe might know? And in England specifically, I guess, because there's probably more Sikhs there than a lot of other places in the world.
Yeah, I think England probably has, or certainly Britain has, maybe the highest number of Sikhs after India. Certainly there is a large Sikh population in Britain. I'm actually teaching Sikhism at the moment. I teach a religious education class for 6th graders, and we're teaching Sikhism. And it was interesting starting to teach this one because unlike when I was teaching Christianity, Islam, and atheism, I knew very, very little about Sikhism going into it. So I've learned a little bit as a result of teaching this class, though I am sort of learning as I go.
And I think 6th grade level is about a good too deep in the weeds, so I think that's perfect.
Exactly. So I think that if you ask sort of the average person in the UK off the street, they might remember that Sikh men tend to wear turbans and they grow their hair out long, and that in the Gurdwara, the Sikh temple, you can get a free meal, the langar it's called. A Sikh friend of mine, when I mentioned I was teaching Sikhism, was kind enough to invite me to the Gurdwara, and we tried the langar, and it's super good. It's all vegetarian, very, very tasty.
Yeah, and from what I understand, they are not strictly vegetarian. They just do that so all can have a meal, despite whatever religion people come from.
Exactly. It's designed to be inclusive and was started about 500 years ago by Guru Nanak. Guru means teacher. He lived in what's now India, in the Punjab, and was very interested in God and religion. And there were a lot of both Muslims and Hindus in this area. And he famously said, "I'm neither a Hindu nor a Muslim. Instead, I follow the teaching of God," which became Sikhism, which is a lot about kindness, showing fellowship to other people. And the idea of the langar being vegetarian is because, of course, Hindus can't eat beef, Muslims can't eat pork. So it was a way of sort of bringing everyone together in that space, as you say.
It is interesting to say that it's neither Hindu nor Muslim in its tenets, but it does take from both, so much so that I think the very reductionist view, which is fairly incorrect, but the very reductionist way to put it would be that it's a mix of Hindu and Islam teachings, right? And taking from both sides. As you said, it was founded in the Punjab region, which is a very flat area of the Indian subcontinent, which is today in both Pakistan and India. And it's a very, very fertile region. A lot of the food of northern India and a lot of the food of Pakistan comes from this region still today. And as you said, Guru Nanak was born in 1469 to a Hindu family, but rejected both. And as you said, it was because he taught that there is just one God who cannot be captured in any single religious tradition. So they're very accepting of other people's faith. Generally, they don't say that other people are wrong in their faith and that want to convert them. It's just more that they have found their way of worship and want to share at the table with anyone else. Largely, those teachings were egalitarian, especially for the time. Guru Nanak rejected caste, which was the social structure of the region. He taught that women and men are spiritual equals, and he criticized empty ritual and priestly authority. And he learned a lot of what he knew from traveling widely from Mecca to Baghdad to Tibet and debating scholars and gathering new people to follow him. When he died, there were more gurus until eventually there were no more living ones, and the texts, which are now called the gurus, became supreme.
The holy book of Sikhism is called the Guru Granth Sahib, and it's the immortal teacher that Sikhs can continue to learn from.
Yes, thank you. And the fifth living guru, Arjan, compiled those into those scriptures, and he built the Golden Temple in Amritsar. You've said that it's on your bucket list. It's on mine as well, because you don't have to be Sikh to visit, but it's just this like very grand golden temple that very good vibes all around. You can go there for a free meal as well. And it's just in this beautiful complex, like over a lake.
And it is golden.
Yeah, it's straight up gold. But this new faith was persecuted. So in 1606, the Mughal Emperor Jahangir had that guru Arjan tortured to death when he refused to convert to Islam. And this is the first major Sikh martyrdom. The Sikhs largely developed their beliefs under the Mughal Empire, which was a Muslim empire ruling over what is today northern India and Pakistan. And this, as you said, it's all about peace. It's all about loving one another. But Sikhism is also quite militant in the way it was formed because of defense. In their tenets, they have to keep a knife on them. And this is to defend the faith, basically, because at the time, there was a lot of persecution against them by the state. I believe in India, they're legally allowed to carry them on planes. I don't know about in the UK, but there's certain countries that have like agreements where Sikh people can carry knives for religious purposes.
No, you do sometimes see, and actually I haven't seen these for a while, but you know how at airports you used to get those bins where it's like, here are the knives we've taken off people?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen those for a while, but you would sometimes see Sikh swords in there.
It's pretty messed up if you're a Sikh walking by and see that.
Yeah, I guess so. Though my Sikh friend Anhad told me that he does have one, but it's just something he keeps under his bed most of the time.
In 1699, this identity was crystallized a bit more. The Khalsa, which we referred to earlier, was created. This is the community of initiated Sikhs who commit to wearing 5 visible articles of faith. These are, at the start, uncut hair, a wooden comb, a steel bracelet, a ceremonial sword, and a specific undergarment. And this is where the turban and beard come from, which I think that's well known in England specifically and in places like Canada now. But I don't have the year in front of me, but I remember about 10 or 15 years ago, there was actually a shooting at a Gurdwara in, Adam has kindly looked it up for me, but I recalled what was in Wisconsin in 2012. There was a shooting where the gunman entered a Gurdwara, which is a Sikh temple, and killed people believing they were Muslim, which would not make it any better or worse on a human loss of life, but it just displays the ignorance in the United States about Sikhism in general. I think if you're in a place like New York City, LA, you might understand the distinction, but in general, like people here would not know what a Sikh is, and they would equate like a turban to a Muslim man. Does that surprise you, I guess?
Not really, to be honest with you. I think there's a tendency to collapse certainly non-Euro-American belief systems into a monolith. The line from The Dictator, which, Sacha Baron Cohen is not great, but he did have a good line in The Dictator where he's talking to an American security official and he goes, I have to tell you, I do not like Arabs. And he goes, well, that's fine because I'm not an Arab. He goes, let me tell you, anyone not from the United States is technically an Arab.
Yeah, I do think the level of ignorance here that is accepted in many circles is quite concerning, but I think that's why we have conversations and we hope people learn one day through education, through meeting people. And in this case, I think people can maybe try the food that Sikh people make, and that can open their eyes, if you ever see a Punjabi really restaurant, it's usually Sikh people that run it. But during this time when these tenets are being established, as I said, 1699, kind of the height of the Mughal Empire, there was also the concept of Sant Sipahi, which is the saint soldier. That was idealized in Sikhism too. And I think we need to talk about this idea a little bit because the guru that established it, his father had been publicly beheaded by the Mughal emperor in 1675. That's the second guru murdered by the empire in less than 70 years. So they looked at this history and said spiritual devotion can't be enough for this community. So Sikhs also have to train and be ready to defend themselves and others. There's a saying attributed to the guru that established this where he said, when all other means have failed, it is righteous to draw the sword. What do you think this combination of a new radical spirituality and martial readiness, like what does this remind you of anything else in the world? Any cultures, any history?
I suppose it is similar to the origins of Islam in some ways. Like Muhammad was a leader of, like a political leader at the same time as he was a religious leader and led a Muslim army from pretty early on. But religion and politics have been intertwined, particularly as a way of making war.
Yeah.
A way of making war, a way of seeking independence, a way of seeking national identity. That's something that repeats time and time again throughout history. You could look at the IRA in Ireland. That's broadly Catholic, and the Unionists are broadly Protestant. You could look at other parts of India, Hindu nationalists, right? That's not quite as militant, but religion and nationalist politics are intimately linked a lot of the time.
Right. And I'm kind of also drawn to like the development of martial arts in places like China, which were developed by monks originally a lot of the time to defend the monasteries, right? Especially during times of chaos. There is kind of this precedent for just defense in a way, even in peaceful spiritual communities. But yeah, so let's move on. This part kind of gets skipped in the history classes, but the Sikhs were not always a minority in another empire. That's kind of how they're known. But for about half a century, they had their own. In the late 1700s, as the Mughal Empire collapsed, the Punjab fragmented into warring Sikh confederacies, and one leader, Ranjit Singh, unified all of them. By 1799, he established a kingdom with its capital at Lahore in Pakistan today, and his empire stretched from the Khyber Pass in the Himalayas to the edge of Delhi. Ranjit Singh's administration was multi-faith. Muslims, Hindus, and Sikhs all held senior positions, and the army was modernized with the help from French and British advisors, and included Sikh infantry, Gurkha regiments from Nepal, and Muslim cavalry. Ranjit Singh died in 1839. What followed was a classic sort of collapse after the main figure passed on. There was fractional infighting, assassinations, and rapid succession of weak leaders. All the while, as you probably could tell from this timeline, 1839, the British East India Company was watching, and they had already...
Of course it was.
They had already taken most of the subcontinent at the time, and Punjab was the last major piece. So 2 Anglo-Sikh wars followed, and they ran from 1845 to 1846, and then 1848 to 1849, which Britain was very busy in Asia at this time, because this was also the first Opium Wars.
Right, yeah, of course.
But the Sikhs fought so effectively against the British that the officers later described them as the toughest opponents they had ever faced in India. And this later kind of secured their spot as a special sort of troop within the British Empire. In 1849, the annexation of Punjab was complete and the Sikh Empire was gone. Following this, rather than suppress the Sikh militias and try to crush them with force, the British recruited them into their ranks. They designed Sikhs as their own really special martial class within the British Empire. And they really were like a classic police force around everywhere Britain controlled. During my master's, I would look through the archives, and you kind of see the early photographs taken in the late 1800s all around in Shanghai and in East Africa and the Caribbean. And there's always Sikh soldiers anywhere there's British presence. They're like the policemen of the British Empire. Why do you think, if you're a Sikh person, why would you agree to this role, I suppose?
Well, Britain's policy in India was called divide and rule. And the idea was that you take an area, split it up into a number of sort of warring factions, lend your support to some and not to others at various times, and just make sure that you are the single most powerful group in all of these sort of squabbling groups. It seems to me that perhaps the Sikhs were given a position of power within this hierarchy. Could that be a part of it? The other option, I suppose, is with this focus on defense and defense of the self and of the community that the Sikhs have. Perhaps that plays into a part of wanting to work as police officers and having this sort of idea of justice around that.
Yeah, and when I say police, it's more like colonial occupying force, essentially, right? So like it's like a militarized police. It was very drastic in that Sikhs were about 2% of British India's population, but soon made up 20% of the British Indian Army. And they were very useful to Britain all the way through into the 20th century. They fought in the First World War at Flanders, Gallipoli, in modern Iraq. Into the Second World War, they fought in North Africa, Italy, Burma, for the British. And I'd be interested to know, like, maybe you can keep your eye out in the future, because I know there's all these cenotaphs around the British countryside and whatnot, with fallen heroes of the British Empire. And I wonder how many, like, of the last name Singh you might see. Maybe none at all. Maybe that part is kind of left off in the local memory, or maybe not.
Maybe, but there is a memorial in central Bristol that is specifically to the Sikh soldiers who fought for Britain during both World Wars.
There you go. Yeah, I had no idea about that. I have no idea how much that consciousness has seeped into the British historical narrative, you know?
Fairly little, though I think though more so now, I think. There's been a conscious effort to include the non-white and colonial forces who fought for Britain during the World Wars in history classes. It's certainly something you're told to include when you're teaching history.
Yeah.
I hope that it is. I haven't taught that period of history myself yet, but I think people are gaining more awareness of it.
And rightly so. I mean, there's so many Sikh people in Britain that contribute to society today that it would be irresponsible to leave that out. But as you know, Britain didn't stay in India forever. In 1947, they left because it became too untenable to hang on to all these colonies around the world after World War II. Mm-hmm. And the Indian subcontinent was split in two. India would be the Hindu majority state, and Pakistan, which at the time Bangladesh was also known as East Pakistan, they were part of the same country until they split. Pakistan would be the Muslim majority state. And this was devastating, one of the most devastating events in the 20th century in terms of the sheer bloodshed that occurred from this and the migration of people. The borders were drawn in 5 weeks by a British lawyer named Cyril Radcliffe, and he had never been to India before.
Of course.
Yeah. In these new lines, Punjab was cut in half, and millions of people suddenly found themselves on the wrong side of a new international border. That humanitarian crisis, like I said, was a catastrophe, and between 10 and 15 million people were displaced, and an estimated 1 to 2 million were killed in communal violence. Trains arrived at stations full of corpses, essentially, and some women jumped into wells to avoid being captured by some of the armed men running around.
Wow.
And the colonial power that had drawn the line simply washed its hands of the consequences of all of this. And the Sikh community was uniquely devastated because they were not Muslim, so they couldn't stay in Pakistan, and they were not Hindu, so they didn't have this natural home in India, though India was the de facto other state, like Hindu majority, but if you weren't Hindu, India was the de facto spot you would be in this arrangement, like Jain, Sikh, Buddhist, Christian. But as we said, Punjab was their homeland, so some didn't leave, faced some consequences in Pakistan, some left to the India side, some left the subcontinent altogether. Their holy sites were scattered on both sides of this new border. The birthplace of Guru Nanak was now in Pakistan, and the Golden Temple was in India. Most painfully, the city of Lahore, which had been the cultural and political heart of the Sikh Empire, was now in Pakistan, and many Sikhs never saw their ancestral homes again. Unlike Muslims and Hindus who had Pakistan and India as states that represented them, the Sikhs had nowhere, and they were a permanent minority in the countries they remained. So, Adam, what do you think this combination of circumstances would do? This is kind of me asking your anthropology brain here. What do you think these type of traumatic circumstances would do to a community, before with the violence and after being stateless? There's a dual trauma here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is my anthropology brain, but my history awareness, my historical awareness suggests that when you see things like this before, usually there is some kind of armed nationalist movement that emerges, and perhaps the forceful projection of a national identity that may be even stronger than if there was a nation state to base that around. I'm thinking specifically of Kurdistan. This to me sounds a lot like Kurdistan, split between countries, large ethnic group. Okay, maybe the religion side of things isn't quite as intertwined there, but certainly the forceful assertion of a national identity would be my assumption based on similar historical events.
Yeah, I think that comparison is pretty spot on. But what do you think it does on a smaller level, in your day-to-day, to go through this as a people group?
I imagine it's tough. It probably builds a lot of resentment and probably a lot of anxiety around your place in the state you exist in, right? The Sikh population in India and I suppose Pakistan, although I think the Sikhs largely left Pakistan, I believe, after the partition.
Largely, yeah. Some remain, but largely left.
But they've witnessed a lot of bloodshed, right? And I think that without having this sort of ethno-nationalist state, which I don't approve of generally, but given that the British rule has been largely split into the quote-unquote Muslim part and quote-unquote Hindu part, not having that sort of representation in one state or another probably leaves you quite anxious about your position within that state and about your political rights within that state as well.
Like the labeling of it, like, oh, you live in the Hindu country now, right? And you're not Hindu. And I think when we spoke about Iran, we're largely against the Balkanization of countries. Though this was quite the opposite with India in that this whole subcontinent was never a unified political entity before the British.
Right.
There really is not a huge case for it to exist in the way it does if you look at languages and ethnicities and religion and all of that. Because I don't even know how many languages are in India alone. But I think I've seen a map of if it was largely split on like historic and ethnic borders. And I think there's like 15 or 16 countries within India that would make sense. But I don't know. I mean, it has made it a larger presence on the world stage, but I guess at what cost internally, right? It's Hindi is the de facto language, and some of the smaller ones are dying out because they don't have utility if you're trying to, work at the national level or travel or things like that. So, I mean, I guess what do you think about this sort of anti-Balkanization and creation of the... Because India itself, like, it wasn't just, this is the new state, here it is.
Yeah.
The new Indian government and their military had to suppress a lot of regions to get them into the fold, including Punjab, including, like, the whole northeast area. That's largely Buddhist, like places like Sikkim, Goa, which had a totally different culture due to being not even under the British for most of its time. It was Portuguese.
Yeah, right.
Places like Kerala that eventually became like locally communist, right?
Well, India, obviously massive country, right? Largest population on Earth, more than 1.4 billion. So India has 22 official languages that are in the constitution, but has 121 major languages, and these are languages that are spoken by more than 10,000 people. And of course, these are broken up into lots of different dialects as well.
Wow.
And smaller languages there too. I suppose this kind of federal state, I guess, is India a federal state officially? Okay, so a quick Google suggests that it's sort of not strictly speaking federal, but is sort of quasi-federal with a strong central authority in the country. Because to me, the example with which I'm more familiar with, which has multiple official languages, is of course Switzerland, where I am from, where I grew up, which has 4 official languages. Not nearly so many as 22, but it has a much, much smaller population as well, around 9 million.
They call that a village in India.
Exactly. But what I will say is that part of how that works so effectively, there are lots of reasons that Switzerland works as well as it does, but one of them is its strongly federal nature. Like each of the cantons has a high degree of autonomy, similar to American states, actually. And so I think that in a country that has such linguistic and cultural and religious diversity that does not have a strong historical tradition of unification, that can work. But I think that the key to that is strong federalization, which it seems to me that India doesn't have. However, I think that India has done some pretty remarkable things given the sort of mess that was inherited from the British, right? There were other empires in the Indian subcontinent before, most notably the Mughals, who conquered most of the subcontinent, but also sort of Afghanistan and parts of Persia as well. But yes, the idea of India, I suppose, didn't exist until, as a political entity, did not exist until the end of the British Raj. And given the situation that was inherited there, I think it's done very well. But I don't know if it is the way to, if you were to design a country from scratch.
Yeah.
I don't know that is the way that you might do it necessarily. As I say, I think that strong federalization is probably the key to making a large and diverse area work within a singular political entity.
Yeah, fair. Now, we're talking largely ideological, right? We're talking religion, we're talking like this macro level of nation state building, and these are largely intangible for the people on the ground, but there were some material consequences that led to this rise of Sikh nationalism as well. In the 1960s and 70s, it adopted new agricultural technologies, high-yield crop varieties, chemical fertilizers, intensive irrigation, and this was especially rolled out in Punjab. The goal was to make India self-sufficient in food, and as you said, they have a large population, so they got very aggressive with these tactics. This was called the Green Revolution, and on the metrics it worked. It developed these high-yield farming techniques that helped India feed itself. Punjab became India's breadbasket, producing a huge share of the country's wheat and rice, but the benefits were radically unequal for the people that lived there. New seeds and fertilizers required capital that small farmers did not have, so they borrowed to buy in, and when harvest failed or prices dropped, they couldn't repay their loans, and debt spiraled. I think we've seen this thing happen over and over in India with the farmers a little bit, even in recent times. Meanwhile, mechanization, tractors, and harvesters meant fewer farm laborers were needed, and rural unemployment spiked. Large landowners consolidated their holdings and got very wealthy, and the environmental cost was severe. So decades of chemical-intensive farming degraded the soil and poisoned the water table. And by the 2000s, Punjab had documented cancer epidemics with entire villages reporting rates far above the national average. The Green Revolution's toxic legacy is literally killing the community it was supposed to be saving at this stage. This is kind of what we're looking at here, this material condition where small farmers are drowning in debt, rural laborers have no work, and the environment is being poisoned. And meanwhile, the moderate Sikh political party has spent years negotiating with Delhi for more autonomy, better water rights, and economic concessions, but Delhi ignores any agreements that are signed pretty much over and over with this Sikh community. This is a classic pattern we kind of see, right, in the same sort of situations, right, with the Kurds, amongst other people groups that are minority groups around the world. So enter a man named Jarnal Singh Bhindranwale. He was a young, charismatic preacher from a traditional Sikh seminary. He preached a return to orthodox Sikh practice, no drugs, no alcohol, no cutting hair, in a community was really reaching out for any solace. So it resonated pretty deeply with a lot of the community there. Bhindranwale was not initially a major political figure, but he was elevated by Indira Gandhi to the Congress Party. Indira Gandhi, kind of confusing. So she was Prime Minister of India, not related to Mahatma Gandhi at all, though she was the daughter of Nehru, who was the first Prime Minister.
Yeah, I had to look this up earlier because it is it is confusing.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Like, she's not the Nepo baby you think, but she is definitely the Nepo baby of India.
Yeah.
Now, she was kind of their Thatcher, I guess. She was very neoliberal in her policies. Her first task was dissolving the Communist Party in Kerala as a member of the Congress Party. But she turned to Bhindranwale because she saw him as a useful tool to split the Sikh vote and weaken their community. And her party actually funded and promoted him in the late 70s. Their plan was that he would peel off religious conservatives from the moderate Sikh party, and the India Congress, which is now the Indian National Congress, would pick up the pieces. And I don't think we need to get too deep into this, but, you know, a large government funding someone who would later become their enemy, right, is pretty commonplace. I think if we think of recent history and we think of the emergence of Hamas, right, initially funded by Israel, the Taliban originally funded by the US, you know. Yeah. It happens over and over again.
All too common, yeah. I remember a headline from, I think, the New York Times a few years ago where it said, in Syria, militant groups funded by the CIA are now fighting militant groups funded by the Pentagon.
Classic.
Absolutely
classic. And I think you even see that in domestic politics as well, where, for example, Hillary Clinton kind of pushed Donald Trump through the primaries because she thought he would be a weaker candidate. You probably see that in the UK as well. There's probably examples of that where that backfires, like Nigel Farage, right? Getting all the attention from, maybe he was seen as a way to destroy the Conservatives from within, which he did destroy, but is now bigger than any opposition.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this was a fairly common sort of left-wing take on Donald Trump. Like, prior to his election in 2016, Slavoj Žižek basically said, who's a communist, said he thought that it was a great idea that Trump would be president because everyone would see how awful it was, and then that would completely destroy the right wing in America, which didn't happen yet.
Yeah, I don't think people anticipate how fascist regular people will go, because
Right.
it has destroyed George Bush conservatism.
Sure, right.
But it has given rise to Nazi conservatism, which is far worse.
Yeah.
I have a quote for you, because by the early 1980s, Bhindranwale's rhetoric sharpened, and he was calling for Sikhs to arm themselves. And this is a quote from him.
I am not asking for Khalistan, but if they do not give us our rights, we will take them.
So he said this quote in 1983, and he and his armed followers moved into the Golden Temple complex, the holiest site in Sikhism, not as pilgrims, but as an armed presence. In June 1984, Indira Gandhi orders that the Indian Army do something that hadn't been done before, and that's to storm the Golden Temple with tanks and heavy weapons.
Wow.
The temple was packed with civilian pilgrims, and it was the anniversary of Guru Arjan's martyrdom, a major holy day in Sikhism. The army sealed off the old city of Amritsar and moved in with armored vehicles, machine guns, and artillery. The fighting lasted 3 days, and much of the Golden Temple complex was destroyed by tank fire. The sacred pool was polluted with blood and debris, and Bhindranwale and his core followers were killed. So were an unknown number of civilian pilgrims. Official estimates put the dead at around 500, but independent assessments suggest that the true figure is much higher, but accurate numbers have never been released.
This was 1984?
Yep, correct.
When I was in the Gurdwara last weekend, my friend invited me to, there was a big sign behind where the sort of sermon's not quite the right word, but there was a lot of singing going on. The service was taking place, and a sign behind the Guru Granth Sahib, the holy book, that said, remember 1984, and we will not... it was something fairly militant, like we will defend our rights, we will not let this happen again. I need to see if I can find the exact wording, but it was strong words about remembering 1984.
Wow, that's powerful to hear. I didn't know they had that within the holy places like that.
Yeah, right behind the holy book.
Yeah, so this, as you can see, is like the original sin. Like, the partition was traumatic, but this was targeted at the Sikhs specifically. And Sikh soldiers in the Indian army immediately mutinied at this. Hundreds were arrested, some were killed. And for the global Sikh diaspora, this was a spiritual violation on a scale that is hard to overstate. It would be kind of like if the government of Italy went into the Vatican with tanks, which they kind of did back in like the 1800s, but they didn't destroy it like what happened here. What does this desecration of the most holy of places and the killing of civilians within it deliberately, what does that do to that same community that we're referring to earlier? The psyche of it.
Yeah, I think it just intensifies that feeling of anxiety, right? Like it shows that there is no safety even in your holiest places. I don't know whether the Indian government has ever stormed holy sites to Hinduism.
I doubt it. Not at this scale. Yeah, not at this scale.
Not at this scale, perhaps, but the fact that such bloodshed can happen in such a holy place must give you pause, right? Like, surely that is the place that would be respected, and knowing that it's not, I think, will make you, nervous.
Yeah, and this became known as Operation Blue Star. There was a phrase in the Sikh community that developed after it, where they said, "You've made every Sikh your enemy." And this wasn't really hyperbole. This was, as you saw in Britain. And it was largely political in nature, like this assault. And as a result, it turned a lot of Sikh people into an armed insurgency. Thousands more militants rose up due to this. And the Indian state basically gave the Khalistan movement its Alamo. But then it got worse, if you can imagine that. October 31st, 1984, Indira Gandhi is assassinated by her 2 Sikh bodyguards. It is a direct retaliation for Operation Blue Star. Their names were Beant Singh and Satwant Singh, and they had served her for many years. And after Blue Star, they had been harassed, told to remove their turbans, and questioned about their loyalty. They killed her, and Beant Singh reportedly said afterwards, "I've done what I had to do." Within hours of the assassination, Congress Party leaders, including local officials and members of parliament, were organizing mobs, using voter registration lists to identify Sikh neighborhoods, homes, and businesses. For 4 days, Sikhs were dragged from their homes, beaten, burned alive, hacked to death, women were gang raped, gurdwaras were attacked and desecrated, and the police in Delhi stood by, did nothing. In many cases, they actively directed the mobs. The official death toll is around 2,800 in Delhi, and independent estimates put the real number somewhere between 8,000 and 17,000. Thousands of homes and businesses were destroyed. Very few perpetrators were ever prosecuted, and even fewer were convicted. Congress politicians implicated in the violence went on to have long and comfortable careers. I have a quote from a survivor who was interviewed by Human Rights Watch in the following years.
"We ran from one neighborhood to another. Everywhere we went, the mobs were already there. The police were not protecting us. The police were with them."
So when you saw the sign that said, remember 1984, I mean, that could also apply to this, later in the year.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to what you're saying. You have the suspicion when this state is created that they may not protect you in the way they protect Hindus. And now you have confirmation, right, that they will forcefully go after you. This is the context for what happened next. On April 29th, 1986, within the Golden Temple itself, a traditional Sikh assembly called on the declaration and the formation of the state of Khalistan, an independent Sikh state. But this never really began, not in a formal way. We're not going to really go through this insurgency because essentially it was just a group of armed Sikhs that over the next couple of years were crushed very violently. And the reason we're kind of skipping over it is because that's where our tale has led to, but it's not over. Like, this was the violent conclusion of Khalistan in India. But Khalistan formed in the global imagination from this point. The armed insurgency in Punjab was largely crushed by the mid-90s, and thousands died. Khalistan did not win a state, it went global. Significant Sikh diaspora communities in Canada, the UK, the US, and Australia have become very political and financial hubs for the movement. Canada has the largest Sikh population outside of India, so not the UK.
Yeah, UK's third, I think.
Which is wild because Canada is a much smaller country than the UK population-wise.
Yeah, but Canada had, until very recently, very generous citizenship laws and immigration procedures.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of it. But yeah, looking at, I've also pulled up the list in front of me. It looks like by country, it's India, Canada, UK, then the US, then Italy, then Australia.
I think the base of operation for the Khalistan movement is in Surrey in British Columbia. They have non-binding referendum votes and community votes on the global Khalistan movement. But this was the spot of a major flashpoint recently when a Sikh man named Hardeep Singh Nijjar was killed. He was a Canadian Sikh leader and a vocal Khalistan advocate. India had designated him as a terrorist, and in June 2023, he was shot dead outside of a Gurdwara in Surrey by armed men on a motorbike.
I remember this story. It was an international scandal that was created.
Yeah. And in September 2023, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau publicly stated that there were credible allegations linking the Indian government agents to Nijjar's killing, and India expelled Canadian diplomats as a result of that statement, and in turn Canada expelled Indian diplomats, and the relationship between the two countries hit its worst point in decades. A few months later, in November 2023, United States federal prosecutors indicted an Indian national for allegedly plotting to assassinate another Khalistan activist named Gurpatwant Singh Panun, who's a lawyer based in the US. And this alleged plot was reportedly directed by an Indian intelligence officer and was foiled by American law enforcement.
It's about time they did something.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, what do you think of the world's largest democracy carrying out targeted assassinations on the soil of multiple Western allies?
Well, it doesn't sound like how a democracy should be behaving, but
is
it
there
does
any
sound
democracy
like how...
behaving well these days?
Well, that was going to be my next point, which is that I think if anything, it's evidence of India behaving like a great power, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's actually very, very true. Yeah,
Yeah.
how many assassinations have MI6 and the CIA done in India?
Yeah, I mean, lots. In India specifically, I don't know, but globally, lots. I don't know. There's not a ton of analysis to be done there, but it does show, I suppose, that they view this guy as a threat, right? You don't bother to assassinate somebody if you don't think that they're a threat.
I was just about to get to that exact point, that states do not kill people over movements that are not a threat, right? They just ignore them. They just watch them, you know?
Yeah.
The fact that India is killing Khalistan activists is probably the strongest evidence that the Khalistan project is still alive, right? You can't kill what's already dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, great power, India. Did you have that on your 2020s bingo card? I think a lot of people did.
Yeah, I think so. That makes sense to me.
So this is the hard part for us, right? As the scope and view of our podcast, like this is a religious national movement.
Yeah.
Some of its factions have killed civilians. There's a pretty ugly strain of Hindu phobia in some of the diaspora rhetoric. And at the same time, the Indian state committed a documented genocide against these people within living memory. So, like, as leftists and as people that generally support resistance, you know, like it's not our job to criticize resistance and its methods. What do we think about? Well, what do you think? How do we approach Khalistan? What do we think?
Well, I suppose this is the anthropologist in me coming through, maybe not so present from earlier, but I think whenever you're talking about political issues and you're saying this group of people wants this region wants this, I think you first need to look at who is actually speaking when we talk about this, and who gets to speak and who doesn't get to speak, I think is always worth considering. When it comes to the sort of moral purity of the movement, I think that is a trap that the left often falls into, and I think has to be something that can be critiqued absolutely, but has to be critiqued on its own terms. Like, I think we can criticize Hindu phobia and violent actions that target civilians from within the Khalistan Independence Movement, but I don't think that is a reason not to support Indian Sikhs and Khalistani separatists in their drive for justice and self-determination. I think that the key thing to do as a leftist in specific regards to Khalistan, if that is a movement that draws your energy, I think is one, to learn a bit more about it, because this is kind of the first time I'm hearing about it. I heard about 84 last week when I was at the Gurdwara, but even then I didn't really hear the term Khalistan until...
I hadn't heard of it until the guy was killed in 2023. I hadn't heard the word Khalistan. I knew that Sikhs had independence movements, but I hadn't looked too much at it until then. Which again, it's like Streisand effect, right? What are you doing, India?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I suppose that's a good point. And I suppose now that I think about it, I must have read it then, but I don't think it clicked with me. I don't think it stuck around in the mind. So I'd say the first thing, be learn about it and then help get the word out about it as well. I think that this is one of those instances where it's not super well known if you're not in the reads of it, I suppose. And that broader knowledge, that sort of amplified Streisand effect maybe, can then be the base, the platform for whatever critique you want to bring from within. But I think that it is our role as the leftists to learn what we can about it and amplify those voices who would like to teach about it, and bear in mind that a movement not being conducted a movement having its problems does not mean that you do not support their move for self-determination and justice.
There are certain independence movements that, as an outsider, are a bit easier to support than others publicly, I think. Certainly in certain countries, Palestine can be both, right? It can be very easy to support Palestine if you're Irish, right? And in Ireland or Spain. Yeah. And a bit more difficult if you're in the US publicly, because there are consequences to those actions, and the UK as well, right? Kurdistan can be touchy with certain circles, right? And certainly Khalistan is very touchy with Indian folk, I will say.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And the reason that I actually wanted to talk about this episode is because I've occasionally been live streaming on our TikTok page, and I'll just put this day in history to talk about with people. On that day, on the 29th, it was Khalistan, the Declaration of Khalistan, that anniversary. So I put that up as one of the days, not even just the single thing, but just one of the topics. And I was getting so much flack from Indian users.
Really?
So they're like, you better not support Khalistan. Like, why do you have Khalistan up there? And then I kept seeing people with the Sikh symbol, which probably the coolest looking symbol in religion. It looks like a Star Wars logo.
Yeah, it looks sick.
People with that emoji in their name popping in, just being like, yo, free Khalistan. Or like people being like, whoa, you know Khalistan? And just know there are 1.6 billion Indian people that will quickly jump to trying to deplatform you. So be careful with this topic, I would say. And that's not to say don't speak about topics. Just know that when it's a separatist movement against the most populated country in the world, there will be a lot of upset people about it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's interesting that on a relatively small platform, you're still getting that flag.
Well, and I was not making a case for anything, but that's where I was like, we should talk about this because it's very spicy in the online community.
I also think and this is a tangential point, but in talking about the moral purity of movements, I was reminded of a point made by Matt Bernstein on Instagram. Probably also TikTok. It was a short form video. Matt Bernstein, journalist, host of the Bit Fruity podcast, a vocal presence in Jewish Voices for Peace, a pro-Palestinian Jewish organization in the US, and a gay man. He's often, some of the hate targeted towards him often says, oh, see how long you last in Palestine as a gay man, you'll be thrown off a roof, that tired talking point, right? Yeah. And he makes the point, it's like, well, if we take the commonly touted statistic that 10% of the population is not straight, and the inaccurate but highest officially confirmed statistic that 70,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israel. It's in the hundreds of thousands, but the health ministry is not capable of recording more deaths. Then at least 7,000 queer people have been killed by the state of Israel, right? So you have to actually look at the material conditions of where that suffering is occurring, rather than the rhetoric that may or may not exist around it for portions of that movement.
I think that's insightful. And I have another question before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Because I think when we look at independence movements, another important question to ask is who else is to gain from this other than the people themselves? Mm-hmm. So if you look at like Kurdistan, right, who is to gain from that? You might say, oh, the US gets another proxy, right, and leverage against Iran or whoever. And like who was to gain from Irish independence? Well, it would be like the enemies of Britain at the time, right? And with Khalistan, I find it difficult to find a who benefits other than the Sikhs, because India's great mortal enemy is Pakistan, right? Mm-hmm. And Khalistan straddles both, and they're asking for land from both. And
right.
So I don't know, who do you think, even from the start, I guess, like, who benefited from non-British India being the way it was? But I mean, who benefits from Khalistan rising as a state in the region? And does that matter for the movement's legitimacy, or any movement's legitimacy of the who else benefits?
I mean, probably China, I'd guess. Slight weakening of the Indian state, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know exactly where the borders of Khalistan would be.
I don't think it would touch China border-wise.
What about not the contested region in, is it
Jammu and Kashmir?
Yeah.
They don't claim any of that.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
But China possibly is from a weakened India.
Right. But then China also doesn't benefit from a weakened Pakistan, who's a close ally.
True. Yes. Good point. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to spend some time poring over a map to try and work out who might benefit from an independent Khalistan. Probably someone on Polymarket.
Oh God, I would like you to lead us through an episode one day on betting on politics and stuff. But that would be an interesting one. But yeah, I just want to bring that up because I was asking myself the same question. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think anyone else does, which is quite rare, I think. I mean, the conservatives in Canada would, because I think a lot of Sikhs would move home and they would like that. Though I will say having Sikhs as neighbors is a very beautiful thing, typically. So it would be their loss.
Yeah.
I'll wrap up this bit by just saying that I think the left doesn't need to endorse every demand of every nationalist movement, but what it does owe the analysis is our honesty. And the honesty of the situation is that the Indian state created Bhindranwale, it shelled the Sikhs' holiest shrine, it oversaw a pogrom against its own citizens, and it's killed dissidents on foreign soils. Those are not disputed facts. They're a historical record. So you cannot understand why anyone would want Khalistan unless you understand what the Indian state has done to make them want it.
Yeah, that's very insightful.
To wrap up, we've been talking about a state that does not exist yet, may never exist, who knows. Though it is a movement and a battle in the hearts and minds of people around the world, though on a global scale, a fairly niche group, but a group that we should be paying attention to, right? If not only the fact that they're our neighbors and we should know what our neighbors care about.
Yeah.
And whatever you think about Khalistan, if you are an Indian bot that found our thumbnail and is just downvoting it in the same way that Greta with a Palestine flag triggers people. The story of how it came to exist shows what happens when a state treats its own people as enemies. And that is a story that we all need to understand. Not because we're all about to become Sikh separatists, but because the same dynamics that produced Khalistan are played out in Kashmir, in West Papua, in the Sahel, in Gaza, in every place where a state refuses to offer its minorities anything but violence. Adam, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I would just encourage any of our listeners who are interested to go to your local Gurdwara. I, as I say, went for the first time last week. It was a lovely experience. I was lucky enough to have a friend who could walk me through it, but I'm sure there will be people there who'd be more than happy to do so. You will have to cover your head, but they have little scarves there, little bandanas that you can cover your head with. No hats, but any bandana is fine. You pay your respects to the Guru Granth Sahib, the holy book, and you can sit cross-legged and listen for a little while, and then absolutely have a meal in the langar, the kitchen, which is both the name of the kitchen and the food that you get. You sit on the floor. And it's really, really delicious and just quite a nice experience. And I think is a wonderful way to experience something that you may not be used to. I'm going to try and organize a field trip there for some sixth graders, so we'll see how that goes. But
nice.
But I would recommend it to our listeners.
That's Adam's School of Rock moment. But I'm genuinely actually kind of shocked that you hadn't been before, just because it seems very up your alley.
It does,
not least because it's vegetarian food. Free vegetarian food.
I know. I just, it's one of those things that's rarely at the top of your priority list, but I'm glad I got the chance to go, for sure.
I think there's also a lesson to be learned growing up, right, as we see the world change around us. Because I think as we're kids and as we're in history trivia competitions or geography bees or whatever, the map seems very static, right? The map seems very permanent, and it seems like it's something that's always been the way it is. But borders can change.
And they do all the time.
They do. And I think the important part is listening to the people that live in those places to see if they would indeed like them changed. Because as we know, most of our borders were drawn by a white guy with no knowledge of the place. So maybe we should listen to some cases about amending those borders, right?
Yeah.
With that being said, thank you for listening, dear listener. Look after each other, stay safe, and keep fighting the good fight. Adam, to close us out, I have a quote from a Sikh elder interviewed by the BBC in Amritsar after the 1984 pogroms.
I have no country. No country can give me more than my faith has already given me. And before we stop recording, I will tell you a little anecdote that you can drop in somewhere if you like about the kirpan, the Sikh sword, the holy sword. So I was once part of a book club that was reading a book called Love After Love by Ingrid Persaud. And the reason we picked that book was because Ingrid Persaud, the author, was like the family friend of one of the people in the book club. And so she actually came on our Zoom call. This was during COVID, and like spoke to us all about it. And it was really great. And in it, she was telling us about the book that she was writing at the time, which has since come out, called The Lost Love Songs of Boise Singh. And Boise Singh was a gangster in Trinidad in the 1930s. And he had this sword that apparently told him to do evil things. And the sword was a kirpan, a traditional Sikh sword. And the reason it was cursed, apparently, was because it belonged to the bodyguard of a Sikh prince during the 19th century. And the bodyguard murdered the prince with his kirpan in cold blood. And because it was drawn in cold blood rather than defense, evil spirits possessed the sword, inhabited the sword. The bodyguard, fearing for his life, having killed this prince, fled on a ship to Trinidad, where a lot of Indians were brought as indentured labor by the British. And this sword passed through generations, eventually landing.
He brought it with him?
Brought it with him, yeah.
Why?
This murder weapon. And I suppose he was still a Sikh at the end of the day. It's part of the look, but part of the official stuff to have with you.
Couldn't find another one.
Apparently not. I think he left in a bit of a hurry, but this sword found its way to Boise Singh's hand. And this author, Ingrid Persaud, she's like, I think I've tracked down where this sword might be. And I want it on my desk for 6 months until I finish the book, and then I will give it to the museum in Trinidad. I don't know whether she ever found that sword, but it's the first time I'd ever heard of someone being on a genuine bona fide quest, like an actual quest to find a cursed sword.
Yeah.
And one day I hope I get to find a cursed kirpan and use it to give me inspiration.
For all we know, it is in her home, and there may be some unsolved murders since then in that town.
Maybe
we have to solve those murders and bring the sword back to its rightful place.
A new arc begins. Let's go. An unexpected journey.
As all great ones are.